Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. Today I'm filming my April wrap-up, which also includes my Magical Readathon wrap-up and my Creature Feature-athon wrap-up. My wrap-ups are always super long anyway, so I think I'm just going to list the Magical Readathon qualifications that I got, and then I'm going to mention the Creature Feature ones that I didn't get, and then I'll link both of my TBR videos down below for those, because if I go through each of the challenges for them it's going to take absolutely forever. So I basically did every challenge that I thought I was going to do, and the TBR videos will tell you which books fulfilled those challenges. So for Magical Readathon I got Ancient Runes, Arithmancy, Care of Magical Creatures, Charms, Defense Against the Dark Arts, Herbology, History of Magic, Muggle Studies, Potions and Transfiguration. So the only ones I didn't get were Astronomy and Divination. So I'm very pleased with that. I got all the ones I wanted to get. I still haven't picked my magical career for the second part of Magical Readathon, but I have all the qualifications for the careers I was considering. So yeah, that was a success. For Creature Feature-athon, I only didn't get 3 of the challenges. I didn't get Classics, which is published 50 plus years ago. I didn't get Not of This Earth, which is to read something with aliens in it, or from a different dimension. Although I guess I actually kind of did get that now I think about it, from one of these books. So actually I did get that one. And I didn't get Killer Plants, which is a shame because I'm wearing my Little Shop of Horrors t-shirt. So I am sorry Audrey too, I didn't get Killer Plants. But I got every other Creature Feature Readathon challenge. I post my bingo board on Twitter, I'll do that later today. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable readathon. I really like doing it, it's such a fun idea, and it's just an excuse to read more horror books really. Okay, so I had a pretty good reading month. I read 13 books in total. I didn't rate anything lower than a 3-star. I read 3 books as part of Elementathon, which I already talked about, and I'll link the video down below where I talk about those 3. So I took part in 3 readathons this month, which is quite a lot, but I had a really good time, I enjoyed all of them. Yeah, so finally, let's talk about the books. First one was an ARC, and I gave it 3.5 stars, and that is The Secret Child by Caroline Mitchell. This is the sequel to an ARC I read a couple of months ago. I always forget what the first one's called. I think it's called Truth and Lies, and I really enjoyed that. This I don't remember a lot about now. I did write a blog post about it at the time, which I will link down below, so read that if you want my detailed thoughts on it. But basically it's a thriller. It's about a detective who, in the first book, she finds out that she's the daughter of a serial killer, and the second book is just, and she's investigating another case, and she still kind of has some stuff with her family going on. This particular case is that people are getting sent vials, like 4 vials, and 3 of them are red and 1 of them are blue, and one of their children has been kidnapped, and they say that if they drink, they get a note that says if they drink one of the vials, their kid will be released, and then one of the vials contains poison. And that's the kind of the vague plot. It was pretty good. It was less interesting than the first one. It had less subplots and less kind of interesting characters, but I still really enjoyed the writing style, and I'm still definitely going to check out more from Caroline Mitchell. I would still recommend this series. The next book I read was The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill. This I gave 4.5 stars out of 5. I absolutely loved this book. I know a particular YouTuber I love, I think Common Spence, has absolutely trashed this book in the past. I understand why, because this is called a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid, and it is, but it's not the kind of feminism that is kind of girl power feminism, if that makes sense. So this is literally the story of The Little Mermaid. There's not really much done with the actual story. It's very straightforward. It's not a particularly creative retelling, but it's written so well. I absolutely loved it, and it's got Louise O'Neill's standard style, which is kind of to write things that are so brutal but they're written so beautifully that it's heartbreaking. I did a blog post about this, so I will link it down below as well for more detailed thoughts, but I really loved this book. It's a very hard-hitting read. I wouldn't read it if you have any kind of issue with reading about kind of like sexual assault and stuff, and kind of bad things happening to women, because the style of Louise O'Neill's stories is that her main characters get put through hell and they get completely broken down by the society that is failing them, and that is very true in this one. It's more positive than her other book that I've read by her, which is Only Ever Yours, which is one of my favourite books of all time. So, but don't go into this expecting, I don't even know what to call it, like, again, girl power feminism. Don't expect that the Little Mermaid's gonna trash them all and like she's gonna be super feminist, because it's not that kind of feminism. It's kind of a just shining a light on the problems with our society kind of feminism. But I love this book. I think it's beautiful. I would still read Only Ever Yours over this one. I think Only Ever Yours is slightly more creative, which is why I didn't give this one 5 stars. But I really loved it, and it's a really good read. The next book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. So this is the sequel to Every Heart a Doorway, but it's actually a prequel, and it's about 2 of the characters, Jack and Jill, and it's about their time in the magical world. So the Wayward Children series is all about children who go through magical doors to worlds, and then quite often they come back. So the first book is about this school which helps them adapt to life having come back from these magical worlds, and this is the book about being in one of the magical worlds. I really loved this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't think I was going to be that invested in their story, the 2 characters, Jack and Jill, but I actually was, and I thought it did some really creative things. This is a proper fairy tale. This is written very much like a fairy tale is written, and I loved it for that. I've given spoilers for the next book that I read, I guess, but I also read Beneath the Sugar Sky this month, and I also gave that 4 stars, so I've given them all 4 stars so far in the series. This Down Among the Sticks and Bones is probably my least favourite, but only slightly. And I did really want more from this world when it ended. I was surprised. I'm kind of hoping that the new one that's coming out is about these characters again, because the story's not over and I just want to know what happens next. It's not the next book I read, but I might as well talk about it now while I'm still talking about the series, and that is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. So this is the 3rd book. This is a sequel, and this is about the daughter of a character from the first book travelling from a magical land back to the school where all the characters are still school aged to try and solve something that happened in the first book. I think this one might be my favourite so far. It was so creative. It involves travelling through a lot of different worlds and nonsense worlds, which are really fun to read about. I really like the characters. It's got some interesting representation in here. And yeah, I really liked the main character. I forget her name now, but I really liked her as a character. And I just loved this story. I loved how it continued from the first one. I loved how I got more details about characters that I loved from the first one. And yeah, it was just fantastic. I think this one is my favourite so far of the ones that I've read. The next book I read was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I finally got around to reading this, and as I suspected, I didn't really like it that much. It's not really, it kind of is a thriller, but it's not really a thriller. It's more like a contemporary, and it's one of those stories that is about rich people and rich people's problems, which I don't actually hate as much as some people hate, but the best thing about this book was the way it ended, and that's kind of, I guess, why it's so popular, because of the way it ended. But it just has a lot of very poetic language, but not the good kind of poetic, kind of pretentious language. if you watch this channel, you know that I kind of have a on again, off again relationship with poetic prose, and it needs to fit the situation for me to like it. And this just felt like rich people talking about stuff in a way that was trying to make it more meaningful than it actually was. Yeah, I don't really remember all my thoughts about this one now because I read it quite near the start of the month. But it was alright. It wasn't great. It wasn't worth the amount of time I've had it on my TBR for. But I would still like to read the second book by this author, Genuine Fraud, because that plot kind of appeals to me more anyway. The plot of this one is literally this girl goes to stay at this fancy family home island place, and she goes every year with these group of people, and it's just kind of about their lives. But yeah, it wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't great, to be honest. The next book I read was great, and that was Freshers by Tom Ellen and Lucy Ivison. Ivison. This is the American cover, which is called Freshman. The reason I'm showing the American cover is because it fulfilled my Magical Readathon challenge to read a book with a red cover. I did cheat a little bit. I am British, I did read the British version, but I didn't want to read the other book that I picked with a red cover, and I wanted to read this one. And I'm so glad I did, because this is the best book. It might be the only book I've read about this particular thing, but it's the best book I've read about the university experience and the British university experience. I have a particular attachment to this book because I didn't even realise it's set in York, and I attended York University for my undergraduate degree. York is the place that I want to live, it's the place I'm moving back to in September, it's where I want to be. And this book just had so many moments. It's set in a made-up York University, but it's got so many details from if you actually attended York University. Like, the colleges have all got kind of funky names, so they're like pretend names of their actual colleges. And it starts off in... I haven't even told you what it's about. So it's basically about these two university students attending university. And the girl, they both came from the same secondary school, and the girl has had the biggest crush on this guy for years and years, but she's never really spoken to him. And they end up going to the same uni, and they meet in Freshers Week and kind of become friends / kind of stuff going on there. But it's sort of a contemporary romance, but it's really more of just a contemporary story about university life in general. And it was such a nostalgia trip for me. The characters were fantastic, I loved them. They perfectly summed up the type of people that you meet at university. There was so many... It was just such an attention to detail. It starts off in Freshers Week, and they actually drink a drink that I drank myself in Freshers Week. So I'm aware that I'm biased when I'm reviewing this, but I think even if you didn't go to York University, if you've attended a British university, this will resonate with you, because it just sums up so many various aspects of university life so accurately, and it's brilliantly written. I really enjoyed it. It's written by the two authors. I believe they each write the other character, so I think the male author will write the male character and the female author will write the female character, but you couldn't tell it was written by two authors. It fit together really well in tone and style. Even if you haven't been to university, this is still a really strong contemporary. It's really interesting, lots of different stuff happens in it, and I just loved it. I definitely recommend it. Even as someone who doesn't usually read contemporaries, I really enjoyed this one. It was great. The next book I read was The Extinction Trials Rebel by S.M. Wilson. I can't really talk much about this book. This is the third book in a series. I think it's the final book, which was kind of jarring because when it ended it didn't feel like the end, but except for like the last page, which seemed to imply it was the end. But this is about... It's a young adult series, and it's about these two... It's a world where there is only two bits of land, and there's Earthasia and Plurasia. I can't remember the name of the second one, but there's basically the human land and the dinosaur land. And the first book is about these extinction trials which people volunteer for, and 100 people get sent to the dinosaur island to try and get food and supplies for the rest of the human island, and when they return they're treated as heroes and they get unlimited food for their family, and it's basically described as the Hunger Games meets Jurassic Park, which is fairly accurate. If you can imagine a world like the Hunger Games, except there's a giant dinosaur island, that's it. This book I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is maybe a little bit generous, but I was judging it based on the kind of book it is, because it's not, you know, it's not a book that is written for me, for my age group. The series as a whole is better written than I thought it would be, but it's also kind of hilarious. So, to give you an idea, the main character is called Storm Chaser. She has purple eyes, and that's the kind of book it is. And none of the science makes any sense. They talk about DNA in these really weird terms. The world building doesn't really make any sense either. One thing that really bugged me in this book is that they encounter fruit and veg that is clearly fruit and veg from our world, but they don't come up with fake names for it. So they just describe it by its physical appearance all the time, which in itself isn't how humans work. Humans will always try and categorise things if they can. They're enjoyable for a read you don't really have to think about. I read it to fulfill a lot of the creature feature readathon challenges, because there's loads of stuff about dinosaurs and reptiles and all that. And yeah, they're not a bad series, they're just an interesting one. The next book I read was The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta. This was also an ARC. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars to. I've heard mixed things about this book. It's essentially about a group of witches, and there were 6 of them, and they're called the Greys. And they're kind of famous within their town for being like the weird misfits of the school. One of their group mentally goes missing, so she's still physically there, but she's not got her personality, and she doesn't really talk to anyone else, and she acts like she's never met the people, and she's not her. So these witches cast a spell to summon another witch to them to help find their friend's personality. This girl comes, and she's a new girl to the town. She doesn't know she's a witch, and she meets these people, and they realise she's the one that they've summoned. And then a boy gets murdered, or he gets stabbed through the heart with a tree on like the day that she arrives, right at the start of the book. And there's like a whole other mystery going on alongside what's happened to their friend. This has got, I've done a blog post for it, so I'll link it down below for detailed review, but I really loved this. It's got the poetic writing thing, and like it's got a lot of features that I can see really annoying people, so it's written really poetically, and then it alternates every other chapter. So there's chapters focused on Danny, and they're written in the first person, so I was walking, I saw these, and then every other chapter is just focused on the group, and that's written in third person. So that was hard to get used to. That bothered me a lot at first, but then I just kind of got into the swing of it and I didn't mind it so much. It's just a really beautiful story. I just really liked it. I can't really explain why I liked it so much, because it's not the type of book that I should have enjoyed, and it's not necessarily the type of book I was expecting, but it's very poetic. I can see some people absolutely loving this book, like really loving it. And I can see some people absolutely hating it, so I would encourage you to read my blog post and also maybe check out some other people's reviews of it before you decide whether to read it yourself or not, because yeah, it's not going to be for everyone, but I really loved it and I'm glad I read it. I don't know if I want a sequel or not, because it feels like there's so much more to do with this world. Also, it's super queer, I should mention that. All the witches are varying degrees of queer, and there's a lot of representation going on here, so that's another bonus for it. Yeah, I'm glad I enjoyed it. I'm really glad I got the ARC, because I was so hyped to read this, but I would caution you against just picking it up on a whim. So the next book I read was Till Death Do Us Part by Stephen Edgar. This was also an ARC. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. So this is a thriller, and it's about, as you might have guessed from that pretty great cover, it's about a woman who on her wedding day her husband is arrested for murdering a woman, and that's the basic premise of the thriller. this was so good for most of it. I really liked the setup, I really liked the characters. Again, all my arcs have full blog posts, so for this one and the next book I've read, because that's also an arc, just check the links down below if you want details on any more of these. But yeah, this started off really well. I got really invested in the story. Not much happens in the middle section. There's not a lot of plot beyond that initial concept and the kind of aftermath of that concept, which was fine. I didn't mind that particularly, but I can see it might bore some people. I didn't find it boring because the protagonist was so great. I was really invested in her story and I liked kind of the other characters. The problem was the ending. It fell into one of the thriller sins that I have in my brain for endings, which is like various things that thrillers do that I dislike. So there's kind of two twists at the end, and one of the twists involved a character that I forgotten existed, which is never a good sign, and that was kind of the problem. It's the main reason I rated it so low, because there's just no stakes when that happens. Like, I don't remember who this person is, they're not that important to the story. So that's kind of mild spoilers, but also, like I said, there's two factors to the ending and you won't know which one I'm talking about, and you also won't know it. You can't guess from what you're reading basically what I've spoiled. But yeah, it was just a pity, because I'd read more by this author. His writing style was great and I really liked most of the book. It's just the ending let it down, and with thrillers that's such an important aspect that it was a shame. And the final book I read in April is 5 Midnights by Davila, Cardinal. This was also an arc, as I said. I gave this 3.5 out of 5. And I only finished this morning as I'm filming it. I did really like this book. I had some problems. It's set in Puerto Rico, which isn't one of the problems that I had, but I'm trying to work out if an issue I had with the story is because if it's my fault or the fault of the story, basically. And I think it's probably my fault, but basically I found it really hard to keep track of who was who character-wise. There were some characters that were done really, really well and I really liked, but I kept mixing up the names of a lot of them, and I think it's because there's a gang of boys and they've all got they've obviously got Puerto Rican names, but I think as well there was a little bit that was the writing style, that they were all just kind of introduced at the same time and they're all sort of interchangeable in their personalities apart from the main important one, and even then I would forget when they were all in a group which one he was, because they all kind of talked the same and had the same personalities. And I did think, because I was hesitant about saying this, because I was like, maybe it's just my own naivety to Puerto Rican names, maybe I was mixing it up because of that, but I think I've thought about it a lot and I'm pretty sure it is the writing style as well. This was an enjoyable story. I haven't actually said what it's about yet, but it's basically about these Puerto Rican teenagers are being killed off one by one on their birthdays. They're all from the same gang, and the two main characters are one of the boys who is in the gang and this girl who is the niece of the police chief who's investigating the case, and she's just come to live with him for a little bit. And that's basically the story. They're trying to find out what's going on with these teenagers, because one of the ones who's killed is her cousin, so she's got personal investment. The boy obviously has personal investment because he's one of the ones who is potentially going to be killed. And it was a good story. It was alright. It wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't terrible either. And I really enjoyed it. I am glad I read something a little bit different. So yeah, so that is all the books that I read this month in April. I think next month I'm gonna split up my wrap up into two. I was gonna do it this month, but because I did the Elementathon wrap up and I didn't really have much time to film in the middle of the month, I decided it wasn't worth it. But I will be splitting it into two in the future, because I hate making long videos. I don't mind watching them, but I know some people don't enjoy watching them. So I'll probably just split it in half for next month. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, it helps me out massively. If you've read any of these books, as always, I'd love to know your opinions on them. I hope you had a fantastic reading month, and I hope to see you next time.